I installed a security camera and caught who was entering my home. When I was out, I still remember the moment I opened the footage. My hands were trembling, stomach tight with that sinking, primal dread that tells you something is very, very wrong. I had just gotten home from a 12-hour shift. Exhausted, still half in my uniform, I plugged in the tiny SD card from the security camera I'd installed in my bedroom the previous week. I wasn't expecting to see anything. I'd installed the camera more out of unease than evidence. Strange little things had been happening. Not enough to call the police. Not enough to say I was being watched. Just off enough to whisper to myself every night, what if you're not crazy? What if someone really is in here? The footage loaded. My bedroom appeared, dark, undisturbed. It was time-stamped 2:03 a.m. I hit play. At first, nothing, then movement. The sheets on my bed rustled, slowly, from underneath. A figure, a man, sat up, casting a hunched silhouette in the gray night vision feed. He was under my covers, lying in my bed. My heart dropped. My mouth went dry. I couldn't breathe. He stood up, moving like he'd done this 100 times before. He walked toward the edge of the bed, stretched, and headed directly to my closet, opened it, took down my blue sweater, the one my grandmother gave me. He held it for a moment, pressing it to his face. Then he crossed the room, sat on the floor in the corner, and pulled open a small leather-bound journal from my desk drawer. My journal, my thoughts, my heartbreak, my life. He started to read. I paused the video. I couldn't keep watching. My hands shook so hard the mouse slipped off the desk. The urge to scream, to vomit, crawled up my throat. This wasn't just a stranger in my house. He hadn't broken in to steal. He hadn't taken anything. He'd been there, calm, comfortable. He knew where things were. He'd read my words. He'd worn my clothes. He'd slept in my bed. And I had no idea who he was. That night, I barely slept. I pushed my dresser against the bedroom door, even though logic told me he was gone. I kept the lights on. And I watched that same video on repeat, trying to understand what I was seeing. The timestamp confirmed I hadn't been home. It was my night shift. He knew when I was gone. He waited until I left. And he had a key. But how? Only 3 people had keys to my apartment. Me, my best friend Chloe, and my mom. I didn't want to call the police yet. I needed more. I needed to know how long this had been happening. So I installed a second camera, one in the kitchen, pointed toward the back door and hallway. Another, smaller, more hidden, in the living room facing the front. If he came again, I'd catch everything. I'd have proof, real, irrefutable proof. I told no one. Over the next few days, I lived like a shell of myself. I checked every door 3 times before leaving. My phone was filled with anxiety-fueled reminders. Check footage, lock bedroom, don't tell Chloe. I even left a sock slightly hanging over a dresser drawer just to see if it would be moved. And it was. 2 days later, I came home and that sock was folded neatly on the dresser. He'd been back. I checked the new footage. There he was. This time, he entered from the back, used a key, didn't rush, walked straight in, removed his shoes, as if that mattered, and headed for the fridge. He opened it, looked around, took out a yogurt cup, sat on my couch, and ate it. I watched the whole thing in silence. My hands were cold. When he finished, he stood up, walked to my bookshelf, ran his fingers across the spines of books, lingering on an old photo frame of me and my dad. He picked it up, smiled, and left. That was when I began to really lose it. I couldn't keep this to myself anymore. I called Chloe, my rock, my ride or die since high school, and begged her to come over. I didn't tell her why, just said it was urgent. She was there within 20 minutes. When she saw my face, pale, jaw clenched, eyes sunken from days without sleep, she grabbed my hands and said, "Okay, talk to me. What's going on?" I showed her the footage. She was silent for a full minute. Then quietly, she asked, Do you know who he is?" I shook my head. "Do you?" She didn't answer right away. Then, "He looks familiar." That hit me like a slap. Familiar? I paused the video on his face, barely visible in the night vision. The curve of the jaw, the shape of his hairline. Something was familiar. deep in my gut, a recognition I couldn't place. "I swear I've seen him," Chloe whispered. "But I don't know from where." I stood up, pacing. "He has a key. A key. Either he had it made somehow, or someone gave it to him." Chloe's eyes widened. "Wait, your mom?" "No," I said immediately. "No way. She wouldn't." But the thought lodged in my brain like a splinter. My mom had always had a strange soft spot for people, especially old friends. People who needed help getting back on their feet. I hadn't even considered. Chloe suddenly leaned forward. "Do you remember that guy from when we were kids? The one who lived with you for a while after his mom died?" And in that moment, something clicked. My blood ran cold. "Oh my God," I whispered. "Jamie!" Jamie had lived with us for about 8 months when I was 15. He was a cousin's friend, or maybe just someone my mom knew through church. I barely remembered the details. I remembered his eyes, though, and how he used to sit in silence, staring. I hadn't seen him in years. Until now, and he was in my house, in my bed. I couldn't breathe. Jamie. The name felt like poison in my mouth. I hadn't thought about him in years, hadn't needed to. He was part of a strange, brief chapter of my life I'd never fully understood. One day, he was suddenly living with us. Quiet, polite, a little too polite. Always lurking around corners, always staring a bit too long. My mom had called him a sweet boy who's been through too much. And then one day, he was gone. No explanation, no goodbyes, just gone. I never asked where he went. And now I was watching him eat yogurt on my couch like it was a Sunday morning at home. "I don't understand," I whispered. "How would he still have a key?" Chloe was pale. "You don't think your mom—" "She wouldn't," I said, almost reflexively. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure. My mom had always been trusting to a fault. She never believed in bad people, only people who'd been hurt. When she found out Jamie had lost his mother, she took him in without hesitation. Even when he was clearly off, even when he made me uncomfortable, and I hadn't spoken to her in almost 2 weeks. I texted her immediately. "Hey, I need to talk to you. Something urgent. Are you home?" No reply. Chloe placed a hand on my shoulder. "We need to go to the police." I nodded. "But not just yet. I want to see one more video. I need to know how long this has been going on." We scrolled back further. There were at least 6 separate instances of him entering my apartment. Sometimes he stayed for just 10 minutes, sometimes an hour. Once, horrifyingly, he stayed overnight. He'd waited until I left, entered 15 minutes later, and left 10 minutes before I got home. One video showed him simply walking around, slowly touching everything. He didn't take anything, but he kept opening drawers, looking at my underwear, touching the edges of photo frames. Once, he stood in front of my mirror and just smiled. Like he lived there, like this was his place. "I think he's been watching you," Chloe said in a hushed voice. "He knows your schedule. That's how he knows when you're not home." A chill ran through me. I hadn't even considered that. I started checking for hidden cameras, every vent, every smoke detector. I tore apart the living room, even the potted plants. Nothing. But I still felt watched. "I need to talk to my mom." It took her 2 days to finally answer her phone. When she did, her voice was chipper, like nothing was wrong. "Hey, sweetie. Sorry I've been so busy. I've been helping a friend from church move." "Jamie?" Dead silence. "What about Jamie?" she asked carefully. "I've seen him, in my apartment, on my security camera, multiple times." She didn't speak for nearly 10 seconds. Then, finally, "Honey, I didn't think I just gave him a spare key in case he needed somewhere to—" "You gave him a key?" My voice cracked. Chloe, sitting beside me, squeezed my arm in shock. "Sweetheart, he's had a really rough time. He was living in a shelter, and I thought, Mom, he's been sleeping in my bed when I'm not home. He's been reading my journal, watching me." Her breath caught. I heard a tiny, shattered gasp. "Oh my God," she whispered. I didn't know. He said he'd just check in when you weren't there, that he missed feeling safe. He promised he wouldn't overstep." "He lied, and you didn't tell me? You gave a stranger access to my home without my permission?" "He's not a stranger," she said, almost pleading. "He's just troubled. You know how much he's been through." "I don't care," I snapped. "He crossed every line, and now I have to call the police." I hung up before she could answer. That night I didn't sleep. Every creak in the apartment made my heart race. Every shadow looked like a man watching me from the hallway. Chloe stayed over. She offered to sleep on the couch, but I made her stay in my room. I didn't want to be alone. Not after watching Jamie just exist in this space. Not after seeing how comfortable he was. I called the police the next morning, explained everything, the videos, the key, the unauthorized entry. At first, they were skeptical. He hadn't stolen anything, hadn't physically harmed me. But once I showed them the footage, especially the one with him in my bed, their tone changed. A detective came by that afternoon to take my statement and collect the video files. "You did the right thing installing those cameras," he told me. "This guy clearly thinks he has some claim over you. He's delusional. He asked if I had any idea where Jamie might be now." I gave them my mother's address. I also gave them every time-stamped file. They promised to follow up. But I could tell in the detective's eyes there was worry. Not because they doubted me, but because he'd seen something like this before. "I suggest you change your locks immediately," he said before leaving. "And if you see him again, don't confront him. Call us." The next day, I changed both locks. I replaced the back door entirely. Got a smart camera for the front with motion alerts. Bought a stun gun. And still, I didn't feel safe. Because Jamie hadn't just walked into my home. He'd invaded my life. He knew where I kept my journals, my favorite sweater, my cat's name. And the worst part? He hadn't come back since the cameras caught him. As if he knew. As if he was watching me watch him. 3 days passed without anything. No new footage. No signs of entry. No yogurt missing. Nothing. But I still didn't feel safe. Every sound at night turned my blood to ice. Pipes hissing, wind against the window, a neighbor's footsteps above. All of it sent adrenaline rushing through my chest. I stopped using my headphones at home. I stopped showering with the door fully closed. I even started talking out loud just to make myself feel less alone. The detective hadn't called back yet. Chloe kept texting to check in, and my mom had gone silent since our argument, which only made the ache in my chest worse. I didn't want to believe she'd endangered me, but she had, even if it was unintentional, even if she thought she was helping someone. One afternoon, I returned home from work and found a note slid under my door. There was no envelope, no name, just one sentence written in messy, familiar handwriting. "I only wanted to be near you." I dropped it like it was on fire. The hallway outside was empty. I ran down all 3 flights of stairs, out onto the street, scanning for anyone. Anyone watching. No one. The sun was still up. People were walking dogs, carrying groceries. Life was normal. But I felt like I was being hunted in plain sight. I called the police again. The officer on the line listened, took down the details, and told me, again, that unless he physically entered the property or made a direct threat, their options were limited. But he left a note. That's proof. Yes, but without a fingerprint or DNA or a witness seeing him do it, it's just a note, not a chargeable offense. I felt like I was screaming into a void. The system was only designed to act after something happened, and I wasn't willing to wait for that moment. That night, I moved all my valuables into a single locked case and stuffed it under the bed. I started sleeping with the stun gun under my pillow. The lights stayed on, always. I hadn't realized just how deeply violated I felt until I broke down in the shower, curled in a ball, fully clothed, sobbing so hard I couldn't breathe. I didn't feel like a person anymore, just a target. 2 more days passed. I tried going back to work, but every time my phone buzzed with a camera alert, I'd freeze. My coworkers noticed. I could feel their concerned glances when I stared blankly at my computer screen, fingers frozen mid-type. Chloe convinced me to stay at her place for the weekend. I agreed. It felt safer to be anywhere else. We spent that Friday night on her couch, watching old movies with all the lights on. She even made popcorn to keep the vibe normal, but I could tell. She was worried, trying to protect me from breaking any further. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Motion detected, front door camera. I stared at the screen, heart hammering. The thumbnail loaded. A man in a hoodie was standing at my door. He wasn't knocking, just standing, still, staring directly at the camera. Chloe gasped when she saw it. "Is that Jamie?" I tapped the feed. It buffered, skipped, froze, then played again. He stood there for another 10 seconds, then slowly raised one hand and waved, just once. Then he turned and walked away. I called the detective immediately. This time he answered. "You said if I saw him again to call. He just came to my door. It's on camera. Do you want the footage?" "Yes," he said, more serious now. "Send it to this email. I'll have someone out to check the area." "Please," I begged. "He knows I'm not there. That means he's still watching, somewhere nearby." I sent the footage. Within an hour, an officer was dispatched to patrol the building, but Jamie was gone. The detective called the next morning. "We ran the footage through our system, and we found something," he said. I sat upright on Chloe's couch, clutching my phone so tightly my knuckles went white. Jamie, full name James Ellis, has a sealed juvenile record, but once he turned 18, he was charged with misdemeanor trespassing in 2019. He was caught in a woman's apartment building lobby in Brooklyn waiting outside her door, claimed he was just checking on her. Charges were dropped. Then, in 2021, a woman filed a restraining order after he followed her home multiple times. Again, no arrest, no convictions. But there's a pattern. A weight pressed into my chest. He's a stalker. "Most likely, yes," the detective said. "He forms attachments, believes there's a relationship where there isn't one, and he operates in that fantasy. But how dangerous is he? That's the thing about people like him. They usually don't escalate until they do." Silence hung between us. "Look," he continued, "we're opening a formal case. But right now, we need you to do two things. One, don't go home alone. Not yet. And two, if you're willing, we'd like to set up a sting." "A sting?" "We place officers in your apartment. You pretend to leave. We wait to see if he enters again. If he does, we catch him in the act, with cameras, witnesses, everything." The idea of being bait made my skin crawl. But it was also the first time I felt like someone was taking this seriously. "Okay," I said, "let's do it." We set it up 3 nights later. I left for work like usual, or at least pretended to. Took my car and drove to Chloe's. Meanwhile, 2 plainclothes officers entered my apartment and waited. Cameras rolling, lights off, silence. For hours, nothing. I kept refreshing the app on my phone. Front door, no motion. Kitchen, nothing. Bedroom, empty. Until 1:37 a.m. Motion alert. The front door opened. A man slipped inside, quiet as a shadow. "Jamie." He paused in the doorway, stood there, listened, then crept toward the bedroom. As soon as he reached the door, the officers burst out. "Police, hands where we can see them!" Jamie screamed, literally screamed, high-pitched, like a child, then tried to run, but they tackled him before he made it 2 steps. I watched it all from Chloe's living room, shaking. He was in cuffs within minutes. He was carrying gloves, a folded blanket, and something that made my stomach drop. A small hunting knife, folded, but there. Later, when questioned, he insisted he had no plans to harm me, that he only wanted to sleep somewhere familiar, that I was the only person who ever made him feel safe, that my home was his home. He said it calmly, like it made perfect sense, and that scared me more than anything. Jamie's scream echoed in my head for days. Even though I hadn't been there in person, watching the footage of him being dragged from my hallway, flailing, red-faced, confused, left a stain on my mind I couldn't scrub out. Not fear, not exactly. It was something worse. Pity, maybe. Dread. A sickening mix of emotions that made me feel like I was still tethered to him. But I wasn't. He was in custody. The officers stayed behind that night and walked through everything again with me. One of them, Officer Luna, explained that because Jamie had entered without permission, with a knife and a history of stalking behavior, they could hold him, maybe even press felony charges depending on the DA. I just needed to provide a full statement, so I did. I sat on my couch with Chloe by my side and told them everything. The videos, the note, the key my mother had given him, the patterns, every broken boundary, every gut feeling I'd ignored. When I finished, Officer Luna looked at me with something almost like sadness. "You're lucky," she said quietly. "Most people in your position don't have cameras or proof. They just feel crazy until something worse happens." I nodded, throat too dry to speak. Before she left, she added, "If you haven't already, you should think about a protection order, just in case." "Just in case" rang in my head all night. I got the call from the detective 2 days later. Jamie had been formally charged with felony burglary and misdemeanor stalking. His lawyer had requested a psychiatric evaluation. Apparently, during his first interview with police, Jamie kept referring to me as his partner, said I was mad at him but would forgive him, that I used to talk to him every day. "I don't understand," I said, clutching the phone. "How did it get this far? I haven't seen him in years." The detective sighed. "Some people build entire worlds out of nothing, and sometimes the people in those worlds don't even know they're in them." It chilled me to the bone. That same day, I finally got a call from my mother. I didn't want to pick up. My finger hovered over decline for several seconds. But something inside me, that old pull of loyalty, of needing answers, made me answer. Her voice was shaky, raw. "Sweetheart, I am so sorry." I didn't say anything. I didn't know that he was still sick. He seemed so grateful, so quiet. I thought he just needed a place to sleep sometimes. I never, ever would have let him in your life again if I thought— "You gave him a key," I interrupted coldly. "You gave a man I barely knew, who lived with us for less than a year, full access to my home. And you never told me. I thought I was helping someone who was alone," she said, crying now. "He told me he was homeless, that he just wanted to feel normal again. He swore he'd never contact you, that he just missed being around the warmth of a family." I wanted to scream. Instead, I whispered, "I'm not a therapy center. I'm your daughter." She sobbed quietly. After a moment, she said, "I'll do whatever I can to help now. I'll testify. I'll admit to giving him the key. I just want you safe." "You should have wanted that from the beginning." I hung up. And that was the last time I spoke to her for a while. The following week was a haze of paperwork, emails, court notices, and phone calls. I filed for a restraining order with the detective's help. Jamie's court-appointed psychiatrist declared him mentally unfit for trial, and the judge ordered that he be held at a secured psychiatric facility for evaluation. It wasn't prison, but it was locked, and for now that was enough. Or at least I told myself it was. Because the damage wasn't just about what Jamie had done, it was what he'd taken from me. I couldn't sleep in my own bed without picturing his body under the sheets. I couldn't walk into the kitchen without imagining him opening the fridge. Even in the shower, I imagined his eyes watching me through the steam. He wasn't just gone. He'd left parts of himself behind in my mind. Chloe helped me pack up my apartment 2 weeks later. She said it gently, like it was my idea. But we both knew I couldn't live there anymore. The lease still had 6 months, but I didn't care. I broke it, paid the fee, got a new place across the city. New locks, new code, no one else with a key but me. I didn't tell anyone the address, and not even my mother, and still, he found me. Not in person? Not yet. It started with a letter. No return address, just my name. Inside was a hand-drawn picture, a childlike sketch of a living room, a couch, a coffee table, a cat curled in the corner, a girl sitting on the rug, smiling, a man standing in the doorway. On the back it read, "Soon." I stared at the drawing for so long I forgot to breathe. How did he know where I was? How did he find me? I turned the envelope over again and again. No postmark, no postage at all. It had been hand-delivered. And I realized, slowly, horribly, he'd already been there. I didn't move for 10 minutes after finding the drawing. I sat on the floor in my new apartment, a place that was supposed to be safe, untouchable, mine, clutching that childish picture like it was made of acid. My cat meowed once, softly, from the windowsill, but even her presence couldn't calm me now. He knew. Somehow he knew where I lived. I rushed to the door. Locked. Deadbolt secured. I checked the windows. No signs of tampering. Nothing out of place. Everything looked normal. But nothing felt normal anymore. I called Chloe first. She answered immediately. "It's him," I said, breathless. "He knows where I live. I found a letter. No stamp. No address. It was here. He was here." Chloe swore under her breath. "Call the detective. Right now." I did. Detective Harris picked up after 2 rings. I told him everything. The letter, the picture, the handwriting, the fact that it hadn't even been mailed. He didn't hesitate. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. When he arrived, he brought a crime scene tech with him. They took the envelope, the drawing, dusted it for prints. Harris asked if I'd seen anything suspicious lately. Anyone watching the building? anyone who felt out of place. No, I said. But that's the worst part. I haven't seen anything. He's invisible. And yet somehow he'd found me. Not through mail forwarding. I never set one up. Not through my mom. She swore she hadn't spoken to him since his arrest. Not through Chloe, which left only one option. He'd followed me. At some point after his arrest, or after his release to the psych facility, or maybe even before, he'd followed me across the city, watched me sign the lease, watched me move in, and waited. The question now was, where was he? Harris stayed calm, but I saw the tension in his shoulders. He asked if I had surveillance at the new place. I didn't. I hadn't thought I'd need it again. I was so sure I'd left all of that behind. That night I bought 3 new cameras. One for the hallway, one for my living room, and one aimed directly at the front door. Then I barely slept. 2 days later, I got another letter. This time, I found it inside my apartment, on my kitchen table. I dropped my groceries when I saw it. Bags crashing to the floor, fruit rolling under the fridge. The envelope was unsealed. No writing on it, just a Polaroid. A photo of me, taken through my living room window. I was reading, sitting on the couch, legs curled up, cat on my lap. I hadn't even known I was being watched. The lighting suggested it was nighttime, maybe the night before. The blinds had been open just an inch. It was enough. This wasn't just fear anymore. It was terror. I ran to the door. Locked. Again. No sign of a break-in. No scratches. No forced entry. It hit me all at once. The lock. It wasn't scratched because it hadn't been picked. Jamie still had a copy of my key. Or worse, he'd stolen one of the copies again. I called Harris in a panic. He came within an hour. This time he didn't bother with calm explanations. "Pack a bag," he said. "Right now. You're not staying here tonight." I didn't argue. Chloe took me in again, but she was scared now too. I could see it in her face, the way she kept glancing at her own windows, her front door, double-checking the locks every hour. And then the next morning, Harris called me with something new. Jamie escaped. I went completely still. My mind struggled to catch up. What? 2 nights ago, from the psychiatric facility. He'd been transferred to a lower security wing after the judge paused his case for mental evaluation, slipped out through an unlocked service door during a storm. We've been tracking him ever since. We believe he's been back in the city. I didn't even speak. I couldn't. This confirms what we feared, Harris continued. He never let you go. He was just waiting. The officers re-reviewed the cameras I'd installed. On the outside footage from the hallway, they finally found something. Motion detected at 3:12 a.m. A man in a hoodie crouched at my door. He didn't open it, but he leaned forward, slipped something through the mail slot. They zoomed in. It was the envelope with the photo. Even while we thought he was locked away, Harris muttered, he was 2 steps ahead. I was relocated to a temporary safe apartment provided through a victims protection program. Only Harris and 1 female officer knew the location. Chloe was instructed not to visit. My mom still didn't know I'd moved, and still I jumped at every creak, every buzz of my phone, every unknown sound at night. Trauma doesn't stop just because the locks change. 4 days later, I woke up to my cat hissing. She stood at the edge of the bed, ears flattened, body rigid, eyes locked on the door. I froze. My bedroom door creaked. It was slow, barely audible, but it moved, inward. I didn't wait. I grabbed the stun gun from under the pillow, dove for my phone, and called Harris as I locked myself in the bathroom. He answered immediately. "I'm on my way. Stay in the bathroom. Lock it. Don't open the door for anyone but me." I heard something crash in the living room. A loud thump, like furniture shifting. Then silence, complete suffocating silence. I pressed my ear to the bathroom door. And then I heard it. Breathing. Slow, deep, on the other side of the door. I backed away, shaking uncontrollably. Suddenly, pounding. The bathroom door shook with force. I screamed. "Then, open the door! It's me! Please! I'm sorry!" It was his voice. Jamie, unmistakable and close. I clutched the stun gun tighter, screamed back, "Get out! The police are coming!" He whimpered, like a dog, like a child. "I just want to see you, please. You know me. You always knew me." Then silence again. I waited. 1 minute, 2, 5. Then the crash of the front door slamming open. "Police, drop it now!" More shouts, a scream, a scuffle. Then, nothing. I heard Harris's voice. "It's okay, he's down. We've got him." He knocked gently on the bathroom door. "It's over." I opened the door and collapsed. Jamie didn't resist when they tackled him. He barely spoke, except to mumble my name. Not with anger, not even obsession anymore, but confusion, as if he was the one being betrayed. He was arrested on the spot, this time with enough evidence and prior violations to ensure he wouldn't be let out again. The officers found a duplicate key in his pocket. He'd copied it during the day I'd had movers haul my boxes to the new place, most likely when I'd left my bag unattended for 5 minutes. He'd followed me that day. He'd waited. He'd planned. At the station, he told the officers that he didn't mean to scare me, that he just wanted to live where love felt warm, that he missed how things used to be. I'd never had a relationship with him, but in his mind, we'd built an entire life together, and that was what made it all so horrifying. The knife they found on him was small, not enough to scream murder, but enough to terrify me, enough to make everyone, even the detective who'd seen worse, go quiet. He had no plan to leave. After his arrest, the court moved quickly. Jamie was found mentally unfit for trial and committed indefinitely to a high-security psychiatric institution. This time, no halfway facilities, no second chances. He'd violated parole, broken a protection order, and had a documented history of stalking. But none of that made me feel safe again. I moved apartments. Again. This time without telling a soul. Not Chloe, not my mom, not even work. I filed for remote leave and started therapy full-time. I bought new locks, bars for the windows, a reinforced steel door. But nothing helps when the fear lives inside you. I'd lie awake at night wondering if the window latch had clicked shut, if I'd locked the door tight enough, if maybe I'd missed something. Maybe there was another duplicate key. Maybe he wasn't really locked away. Maybe this time he'd come in through the fire escape or the ceiling vent. Therapists called it hypervigilance. I called it survival. The hardest part wasn't the fear, though. It was the grief. Grief for the version of myself that used to feel safe in her own home. The woman who used to fall asleep to the hum of her fridge and the purring of her cat without staring at the shadows. Who didn't check over her shoulder when walking to the car. Who didn't assume every knock at the door might be someone who had memorized her schedule and built a fantasy around her. Grief for what I lost. My trust, my sleep, my sense of reality. But slowly, therapy helped. Chloe helped. Even Harris, who kept checking in weeks after the case was closed, helped. He told me once, "You didn't imagine it. You didn't overreact. You survived it." I started writing again. My journal had become something Jamie had violated, but I took it back. I started over. Page 1, new cover, new words. And I started turning the story into something I could own, instead of something that owned me. 3 months after the arrest, my mom and I met for coffee. She looked older, not in years, but in weight. The weight of guilt. She hadn't stopped apologizing. In letters, in voicemails, in a clumsy bouquet she left outside my old apartment after I changed addresses. This time I was ready to listen. She cried the moment she saw me. I didn't know what he would become. I just wanted to help someone who was hurting." "I know," I said quietly. "But you forgot to protect the person who trusted you." I will never forgive myself. And I believed her. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. We kept in touch, slowly, carefully, but I never gave her a key again. Some boundaries stay. 6 months after the final arrest, I received an official letter from the institution where Jamie was being held. It said he was stable, no sign of further psychosis, under strict medication, regular sessions, 0 contact with the outside world unless approved by the court. There was a form inside. Would I be willing to provide a statement? The words blurred as I stared at them. I set the paper aside. I didn't need to relive it all over again for a courtroom. I'd already done the hard part, surviving it. Instead, I wrote my own letter. Not for the court. Not for Jamie. But for the girl I was before it all happened. I told her, "You didn't deserve this. You weren't naive. You weren't careless. You saw the signs and trusted your gut. You fought. You protected yourself. You stayed alive. He didn't take your mind. He didn't take your spirit. He didn't win. And then I folded that letter up and slid it into the front of my new journal. Some people keep memories in photographs. I keep mine in scars. But they're mine, and he can't touch them anymore.